Hello everybody, I'm Bill Hammond and I actually paid to see this. And welcome to this year's Oscar Blitz, where I break down every category at the '96 Academy Awards. Be sure to bookmark and subscribe actuallypaid.com to keep up with all of the analysis both in print and on video. Tonight we have the first category that we're going to take a look at right here on the channel, and that's Adapted Screenplay, which of the two writing categories this year is definitely the stronger. All 5 nominees are up for Best Picture, including the favorite from both a critical and audience perspective. So who should take home the gold this time? Let's find out. Also, be forewarned that a general spoiler warning is in effect for all of the Blitz coverage, so if you haven't seen these movies, proceed with caution. American Fiction, Cord Jefferson, based on the novel Erasure by Percival Everett. What we have here is one of the finest satires of the 21st century so far. Writer-director Cord Jefferson, who's worked on tremendous TV shows like Succession, The Good Place, and Watchmen, delivers some truly biting comedy about how well-meaning people can act in very disingenuous ways, pigeonholing the very black voices they profess to want to amplify simply because they don't fit into a victimization narrative. No punches are pulled as Monk Ellison gets deeper and deeper into his elaborate hoax of creating a pandering, stereotypical novel and persona in order to expose the hypocrisy of people who are, like most people in any industry, far more interested in the bottom line than in creating something worthwhile. Well, Jefferson has created something truly worthwhile here, tackling everything from political correctness, to guilty pleasures, to family drama, to working within a system that you might actually despise. It's amazing work. I just hope his studio bosses don't take the jokes too personally. Barbie, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, based on characters created by Ruth Handler. A lot of huffing and puffing surrounded the build-up to this nomination, with many people adamant that this should have been nominated for original screenplay instead, since Gerwig and Baumbach didn't directly adapt a book or a story. However, that argument doesn't hold any water, and if American Fiction taught us anything, it's to look beyond the surface level to see what the real motivations are. Simply put, the field for original screenplay is much easier to wade through than adapted this time around, and the film's advocates just wanted a quicker, safer path to a major category victory. The Academy rules are clear. Just like any Batman or James Bond movie that might come about that isn't based on a published story, you're still adapting the character and established properties around it. That's adaptation, deal with it. As to the actual script, the naysayers honestly shouldn't have bothered, because it has very little chance of winning based solely on the merits. Don't get me wrong, I love this movie. It's tremendously fun, but the screenplay is, by a fair margin, the weakest element of the film. There are great lines of dialogue and jokes in the more comedic moments, and it's very hard to top Barbie's triumphant final sentence.
I'm here to see my gynecologist.
But from a plot and theme standpoint, there are a lot of issues. Ken's complete heel turn makes no sense, the generational discord between Gloria and Sasha is basically forgotten as soon as it starts, Will Ferrell and the Mattel board disappear for several lengthy scenes at a time, and of course, the messaging just beats you upside the head over and over again, capped off by America Ferrera's rather sanctimonious speech that just feels out of place in this particular movie. It feels like Gerwig and Baumbach were telling 2 separate stories and then just mashed them together, and it doesn't always gel. This is still a better script than a lot of others we see every year, but it's far from Oscar-worthy. Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan, based on the biography American Prometheus, The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin. The strength of Oppenheimer's script comes not from the dialogue, but from the story structure. This is a 3-hour movie, and amazingly, it never drags. This is because Nolan keeps every scene, even the quieter ones, expertly paced and full of energy, which is highly appropriate given the subject matter. As he's wont to do, Nolan splits the story into 2 timelines, one leading up to the nuclear test in Los Alamos, and the other dealing with Lewis Strauss's Senate confirmation hearings, which include the kangaroo court session that resulted in Oppenheimer losing his security clearance. Both stories are thematically intertwined and symbiotic, showing both the potential of scientific exploration and the cold realities once the deed is done. This intermingling of two plots succeeds where Barbie came up short because no one takes the time to establish the proper character and plot relationships, allowing them to naturally feed into each other. This is why he was able to detonate the atomic bomb 2/3 of the way through. He knew he had enough compelling plot to keep the audience's attention for another full hour after the climax. That's some Shakespearean stuff right there. Poor Things, Tony McNamara, based on the novel by Alistair Gray. Most of the comedy in Poor Things doesn't come so much from the page per se, but in the delivery of the material. It's a great story, but the dialogue relies on the cast to sell it. For example, when Bella hits Duncan, Mark Ruffalo responds by saying, "Ow." That's a normal human response, but it's in how he says it that matters. He gives Bella a stunned look, pauses for a moment, and then says, "Oh," in the most foppish fashion possible. Part of that is the interpretation of the actor, but a much larger part is in how the writer dictates the character's personality on the page. That's where the Poor Things script shines. The phrase "furious jumping" has now become my favorite euphemism of all time, but apart from that, the dialogue itself isn't all that memorable. It's the stage direction and the character beats that give the cast and director Yorgos Lanthimos the information needed to properly depict it. The Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer, based on the novel by Martin Amis. The Zone of Interest lives and dies by the irony of its visual presentation, not the script. Everything comes down to whatever emotional reaction you as a viewer have to the sight of this quaint upper-class family home with Auschwitz in the backyard. Once you get past that, however, you notice that the screenplay itself is basically empty, eventually meandering all over the place with no narrative guide to what we're seeing. We have several scenes shot in night vision of a girl leaving food for the camp laborers for some reason, a random scene where presumably this same girl plays piano, and of course the utterly baffling end sequence where we just jump to the present-day Auschwitz museum and watch people clean it for several minutes. I'm all for giving the audience intellectual credit and not holding their hand the whole way, but you've got to give us something in the form of context and dialogue for what we're seeing if you're not going to make the visuals patently obvious. Glazer fails massively on that front, begging the audience to draw their own conclusions, and to me that just comes off as pretentious. The knowledge of the horrors going on over the fence only takes you so far. You have to tell an actual story. So, after all that, here's how I rank the nominees. In 5th place is The Zone of Interest, a visually striking work without an actual plot. 4th place goes to Barbie, which has great dialogue, but clumsy moralizing. 3rd place is Poor Things. 2nd goes to Oppenheimer, and if I had an actual Academy vote, it would go to Cord Jefferson and American Fiction. That's how I see things, but how would you rank them? Let me know in the comments down below, and as always, keep it locked on the blog, actuallypaid.com, for even more analysis as the Oscar Blitz continues. I'll be back next week with the second video breakdown of this cycle, taking a look at visual effects. Until next time, everybody, I'm Bill Hammond. I actually paid to see this.